with eczema it's one of those conditions where like it's quite unpredictable, you know. So now it's more like, okay, fine, you sort of you tell yourself that you're managing it, but you don't know when it comes back how strong it will come back. I don't want eczema to actually stop me from living my life, basically, because it's always going to be there regardless.
Our meeting in June already. We're halfway through the year. And tonight we are discussing a critically important part of atopic dermatitis, how it affects our emotional well-being. And just before I move on to introduce our guests, it's an all team, all Cape Town team again. So we'll have to get some of the other provinces involved next time as well. There is one thing from my side, and it is that if you take away one thing from tonight, please know that you are not alone in this. I constantly meet people who think that they're the only people that are suffering with this, and really, you know, suffering alone is just, you know, it's just going to cause more and more anguish. Second thing is I need to do some housekeeping tasks. So if we need your help actually to determine the severity of atopic dermatitis, eczema in South Africa. And for that, this is specifically for adults. And for that, I'm going to ask whether you would spare a few minutes just to fill in a survey, and the survey link will be in the comments. So please see if you can fill that in, please. Then the other thing is we are trying to grow our advocacy network. So if you feel that you can contribute as an advocate to the Eczema Society, then please consider attending a free workshop. It's free workshop on how to advocate for eczema patients, and that will be then, if you can mail send a mail to the Allergy Foundation of South Africa. But the link will also be, the email address will also be in the comments. So now I have the honor of introducing our two guests for the evening. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Dr. Coenie Hattingh. He is one of our brilliant psychologists in Cape Town. And Coenie, it's an honor to have you with us this evening. And we will get to hear all your pearls of wisdom very soon. And then we have Eva, someone who is really very inspirational to me. And she has been living with eczema for many, many years. And she is going to share her vast knowledge from an experience perspective. And Eva knows probably as much as I do about eczema because she reads a lot as well. So welcome, Eva. And then the very last thing that I need to do from just as a housekeeping rule or housekeeping task that I have to perform, please, before I forget, I'm going to ask that you remember to fill in your questions in the comments as well, because we will have a Q&A session. And if we don't manage to get to your questions, because we're completely overwhelmed with questions usually with these meetings, then don't worry, we will get to it. Now, Coenie, we are going to move on to you now. And I wonder why and when, from your perspective, why and when should an eczema patient come to see a psychologist?
Thanks, Suretha. It's such a pleasure to be here. I think psychological medicine is different to bodily medicine in the sense that the only real clinical indication to seek treatment for psychological suffering is to be human. It may sound strange to seek out psychological clinical care when you're suffering from a condition that's quintessentially physical. The thing is, though, even though the problem is physical, it still feels like something to be a person who's suffering from something like eczema, for example. So the need to address the meaning of this form of suffering to the person who's suffering from it still exists. So our bodies are represented in our minds. So the skin holds a very particular symbolic significance for us. So from our earliest moments in life, the skin comes to represent the limiting membrane. So in other words, the interface, if you will, between inside and outside, me and not me. It's also the sensory receptive surface by which we begin to identify conditions in the environment. So we are also in part identified by the particular arrangement of the skin on top of the underlying structure of the body. So in a symbolic sense, the skin also becomes the interface through which we are seen by the significant others in our lives, beginning with our primary caregivers. So when the skin becomes affected by illness, such as severe eczema, a person's symbolic representation of the skin changes. And their experience, in a way, devolves into an inescapable form of torture. So often people experience extreme feelings of helplessness that are often comorbid or accompany feelings of severe depression or low mood, anxiety. People can often experience frustration and anger that their body is failing them in a way. And sometimes this anger is kind of turned inwards. So it invariably affects relationships where often a person's aversion to how they perceive themselves and how their body has changed, the skin has changed, can be unconsciously externalized and projected into significant others, which can lead to convictions that the people in their lives are repulsed by them. So the suffering accompanying conditions of the skin is very highly idiosyncratic and complex, and so vast that seeking psychotherapy really is an essential part of a holistic approach to treatment in severe skin disorders.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. Because every day I see patients who are suffering from chronic or from severe skin pain because of their eczema. And having pain and itch. I mean, itch, we can compare that, this chronic persistent itch, we can compare to chronic pain. And that type of torture that one has to deal with daily. And then, of course, we have our caregivers as well. that are suffering as well, in that they are constantly they're grieving for the normal life that they dreamt that their child would have, and so I see that a lot as well. And it's really to be able to look after yourself properly, to be able to look after your child properly. You have to have that strength, and we don't necessarily, we're so, unfortunately, if we're constantly struggling, and we're constantly and we constantly struggling with atopic eczema, then we can't give our fullest to deal with our skin disorder, but also to help our loved ones as well. Now, Eva, you have a lot of experience with this suffering yourself. Even I think you told me from the very young age of about 4, or you remember being in hospital, and being and really, really, I don't even want to, unless you want to tell us, but the things you told me really made me very sad for the medical profession many years ago. Hopefully, it's a little bit better now.
Yeah.
But Eva, maybe can you tell us a little bit about your journey, because you are the expert in your condition, and also, what have you found to affect your emotional well-being most? Let's talk about your journey first.
Okay, well, I've had eczema since babyhood. I basically don't know what it's like to live without eczema. Well, obviously, I've had good times, but I've had very, very many very bad times. And indeed, most of my early childhood memories circle around my eczema. Hiding from my mom, getting my clothes off, and going crazy scratching, being told not to scratch, not to scratch, not to scratch all my life, being covered with tar ointment, because in the 60s that was what the treatment was. So stinky black tar ointment, as well as the eczema oozing through. No, they were not fun days. But luckily now treatment is far more holistic. But my parents really suffered with me. And it's only in the past few years that I actually understood, because that scratching, and it really helped me to understand that scratching is a reflex behavior. Baby scratch. You don't, as an eczema person with severe itch, you don't decide to scratch. You have to continually decide not to scratch. And I, as a child, I think my parents were so anxious about this continuous scratching that I thought scratching was the naughtiest thing you could ever do. I was so continually told, no scratching, don't scratch. I was given splints. I was tied down not to scratch. And yet I scratched, because I actually can remember as a 5-year-old, I think, burning myself on a stove because the pain was more attractive than the scratching. That's how severe the itch becomes. You'd rather have the pain from a burn, and it was very willful and very conscious, than the continuous itch. That I thought scratching was naughty. And somehow you internalize that. And, even as an adult, I say, now look what you've done to yourself again. Look, it's all, and your whole self-worth goes down when you basically see what you've done to yourself with your scratching. And no, it is a reflex behavior. It is not you. There is no reason to feel guilty about scratching. And that to me was quite a breakthrough. And yes, as Coenie says, you suffer from a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression and a lot of decreased self-worth. But what I also want to stress is the very relentlessness of the condition. It isn't something you suffer for a week or for a month. It's a lifetime. And if you're going through a bad phase, it means you're just fighting. You are battling with yourself. And yes, your skin is your external self, as Coenie says. You are in this continual self-battle, 24/7, because your sleep is so disrupted. And that, you know, you wake up in the morning and your prayer is, God, get me through this day. I don't know how. You know, you are so continually battling with yourself, battling to hold it together. But at the same time, you might have a family, a job, you have household tasks, you have increased household tasks because of your eczema. You may even have a child with eczema itself, and things become very overwhelming. And then it is very imperative to seek help, to seek psychological help. The actual physical caring for the eczema is already so overwhelming that you need to have someone to unburden to that understands eczema. The first time I saw a psychologist in the 80s, I was just told, well, find something relaxing to do. And I looked at her and I said, well, if that's what your psychological help, it's pretty useless. So, but find someone who understands how overwhelming and how relentless your battle with yourself can be because of eczema.
Mm-hmm. And tell me, are there any specific emotional or triggers that you thought that have you found to affect your emotional well-being most? Was there something specific that I think you mentioned tiredness. That's definitely something.
Tiredness,
you know, sleep
Yeah.
issues, tiredness, and then that's definitely
yes.
unfortunately
If you take insomnia by itself, you take away the itch and everything else, but put someone in a situation where they sleep maybe 2.5 to 3 hours every night, and that sleep is interrupted, so they never get into REM sleep or deep sleep because it's interrupted all the time by itching and scratching. Do that, take away, give that to anybody, and you will see anxiety, you will see depression, you will see decreased concentration, and all the effects of insomnia is well documented. So insomnia by itself has severe psychological consequences. And I think that must not be underestimated in a person with eczema and needs to be addressed. And yes, so that is definitely a trigger. You become so exhausted and you make mistakes because you are exhausted. And being exhausted, your feelings of self-worth goes down. So I think the exhaustion that eczema causes is very important to address. And the other one is just continuous itch. So you are getting this high level negative stimulation from yourself all the time. And it's very hard to maintain positive about yourself if you get negative input, but from your own body the whole time.
Yeah. But it's also that, I mean, you said as well that it's interesting. I never thought of it that way, that you thought that scratching was the naughtiest thing that you know, or that it was a naughty thing to do.
Yeah.
And then that obviously affects the way you think and feel about yourself, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's something that we can't control. If we are itching, scratching is not something you can control. It's something that that we try to control, you know, by thinking about it. But you obviously had that continual negative input from
Yes,
that
as
as
a
well.
child and as an adult too. I remember being hospitalized in the 80s and being told quite severely by the medical staff to stop scratching. So even that recent, 80s is 40 years ago, but you know, that the understanding that I'm not scratching because I want to scratch. I'm scratching because my body is doing this for me. you know, and understanding that has helped me cope with my eczema and be more forgiving towards myself when things get out of control.
Yeah, being forgiving to oneself is definitely something that that's an interesting way of you know that I mean it's inherently I know that also that we have to be more forgiving towards ourselves to have a better you know a better self-image and but it's something to do with eczema as well. It's not something that I thought of before, actually. So thank you for sharing that, Eva. I think that that is the what gets me every time is when you tell us about that you were tied up in hospital. That really, I mean, even now I can feel it again. You know that
Yeah.
goose flesh that you
I
experience or
spent
that
3
you know
weeks,
that you have to go through that.
3 weeks as a 4-year-old being tied up. And of course, my skin looked a bit better. But as soon as I was discharged, the eczema came back because it was not treating the actual eczema. And it happened to be that there was measles or something at my preschool. So I was in solitary confinement too, and not even my parents were allowed to come in. I was in this little
Oh my
glass
goodness.
cubicle. I can actually give you a day-by-day account of those 3 weeks if you would like. That is how severe the impact was on my psyche of basically tying me down and putting me into solitary confinement as a 4-year-old.
Oh,
That's
That is
shocking.
what the understanding of eczema was in the early 60s. It was really, and the understanding of early childhood. Come on, you don't do that to a 4-year-old ever. But it, luckily, you know, things have evolved, and luckily there is far more support. My parents had absolutely no support when it came to how to cope with a child with eczema, how to deal emotionally, how, you know, there was no support whatsoever. And I really appreciate my mom for trying so hard. Coming from a stoic Dutch family, it was, you know, you grin and bear it, which I've done all my life, which has had its disadvantages too, in not being able to face the emotional impact of eczema for a long time. You know, it was like, yeah, you know, it's what I've got. I've got to live with it. You know, my mom never made excuses for me. No, you can't do it. Although obviously she knew my allergy triggers. I, for instance, cannot go anywhere where there would be animals. That was a very severe allergy. It still is a very severe and a very socially restricting allergy trigger for me. But she basically treated me as if there was nothing wrong. I mean, but I think inwardly it must have been. I mean, my youngest daughter has severe eczema as well, and I know what I go through for Sylvia. And my mom went through a harder time because she had no understanding and no support whatsoever.
And thankfully, these days, I mean, eczema is still really, really difficult to manage. That's an understatement, but at least we have some hope, and there is some hope on the horizon for atopic eczema. And besides that, we also now know we don't have to use that stinky brown ointment. Hey, Eva.
Yeah,
so,
no. So in fact, I drive past a road that gets tarred, and I have this emotional reaction. You know, that smell just is such a trigger for me.
Yeah. So Prof. Jordan taught me that he's my teacher. So he taught me that tar belongs on the road. So not staining your clothes and that awful smell. Although some people still swear by it and they appreciate it. So So shall we have a look at, let's see if we have any questions. I am looking in the chat box and I don't see anything there. So our technical support will jump on that quickly, I think. So what is the thing? I wanted to ask you something, Ava, but it's actually now slips my mind. So I think oh yes, let's I would like to mention our support group now as well. On Facebook, because I was the obviously gives my age away, but that's the only one that I really understand ish, I think anyway. And Instagram we've moved on to. That one. I struggle with Instagram, but forgive me. So on Facebook we have a closed group. So if you want to share your experience in the safe environment of like-minded people, then please, if you're not on there yet, then consider joining. But if you fill in everything, please fill in all the questions, because if you don't fill in the questions, then I won't allow you into the group. We've had some bad experiences with people who spam the group before, so we have to be careful. And people are sharing their private experiences, their personal experiences, and that is why it's so important to keep this a closed group. But on Instagram, of course, we can have some more. We can have some. There's a little bit more. Well, it's actually also still closed, so sorry about that. But yes, over there we like to support each other, and we want to make sure, because that really is, remember what I said, you are not alone. Then also, just as a reminder again, part of this whole support group, the idea is to also become an advocate, so to build the advocacy group for eczema. And what that would be is more in a supportive, to be more available, or to really just support each other as we've been doing so far. But we would like to also give people the opportunity to attend an advocacy workshop that, remember, is free. So I think that we can move on while we're waiting for the questions to populate. We can move on to just a small break, a short break, I think. Yes, we're going to look at two eczema patients' experiences.
All right, guys.
With eczema, it's one of those conditions where like it's quite unpredictable, So now it's more like, okay, fine. You sort of you tell yourself that you're managing it, but you don't know when it comes back how strong it will come back. I don't want eczema to actually stop me from living my life, basically, because it's always going to be there, regardless.
I didn't want to give up. I was strong enough to, but eventually I had to give up. My body was sore. I couldn't continue anymore. The skin disease is about I was working in the street. My whole skin was full of sores. My feet were swollen, my whole body. This part was like this, big. I would like to work, but I can't. I'm too scared.
Just a reminder to post your questions if you had any. And then I still have my wonderful guests on our show today, on our support group meeting today. Sorry about that. And we have Coenie, who's our psychologist here in Cape Town. Very used to dealing with people with chronic diseases. And we know that atopic dermatitis is a chronic condition. I don't like saying disease, but sometimes if it's so very severe, then we can definitely call it a disease. But no one likes to hear that they have a disease. So I usually like to say condition, so chronic condition. But it is important to realize that we have when we have such severe eczema that it can affect us mentally, because all of this inflammation that we have in our skin, just our brains also just lie in that type of inflammation as well, and that causes a lot of emotional issues, isn't it, Coenie? So a lot of well, obviously problems like depression, anxiety as well, and then this feeling of being unwell.
Absolutely. I think that the brain and the mind are inseparable. So there's a reciprocal influence between the two. And if you're chronically unwell, and your stress hormones are elevated, and you're in chronic pain and discomfort, and your sleep is deprived, that really reduces your redundancy and what you're able to bear. It's like being really worn out on a psychological and physical level. If it's your skin and it's severe, it feels inescapable. So you can often encounter feelings of extreme helplessness, which is something I think us human beings can't really deal with very well on our own, feelings of being profoundly disempowered in this way. And feeling like your body is letting you down, or even, in the sense that your body's attacking you or sabotaging your life. It's absolutely dreadful.
Yes. And Eva, you've obviously experienced all of these things, but tell me, what do you do that helps your mental health as an eczema sufferer?
Okay, and here I also want to stress that it's different for everybody. Just like eczema itself is highly variant, your emotional response and what's going to assist you emotionally will be very, very greatly too. I just want to go back to something you and Coenie mentioned, and that is that chronic levels of inflammation affect your brain, and I think especially the brain of developing children, quite significantly. If I look at my own daughter, she got her eczema started at 2, and then from 2 till about 6, 7, it was very severe, and as a teenager, it was very severe as well. But when she was severe as a child, she also got eczema herpeticum time and time again, and hospitalized, severe infections. Since 16, she was on immune suppressants, and she's been a lot better. Her skin's been a lot better, but as a young adult, she developed severe depression. And of course, I haven't got the science to completely back it. But I think that depression is actually caused by her early childhood abnormal immune environment. And in fact, a dermatologist once mentioned to her that so many of her severe early childhood eczema patients develop severe depression as young adults. And please don't negate that the effects can be not only when your eczema is severe, but also when you're relatively healthy. So to come back to the actual question, what do I do to cope? Lots of things, because there's not one thing that is the answer. As I said, relieving myself of feeling guilty about scratching has been a major breakthrough for me emotionally, that it's not my fault that I wake up in a bed full of bloodstains and skin in the morning. That is not my fault. And that is an important thing. I use several stress management techniques, and here I have to say that when your eczema is very severe, nothing really works. So you use relaxation techniques, you use meditation and prayer, you use a TENS machine to give you alternative input, strong input than scratching. I do go for slow, relaxing walks. I do exercise, especially early in the morning when it's cool, but not moderate exercise so I don't get sweaty. I do use arts. I use visual arts. I use dance. I use music. So the responses, ways to cope can be very, very varied, and you need to find your own method of coping. Distraction helps. Not that you can be totally distracted from the edge, but especially with young children. With my Sylvia, luckily she loved stories because she was often too sick to play, which worried me because play is so essential in early childhood development. I used to sit her on my lap and actually physically hold her hands, and we would read story after story after story, discussions about stories, because that did distract her. So distraction does help to a certain degree. And any other, the sort of off-pat things to keep psychologically healthy, like a good diet, staying hydrated, looking after yourself, all contributes. But as I said, if you're really bad, it doesn't really work. You just go down that plug hole emotionally. You become so exhausted. And yes, that is when you need help. And getting help with daily tasks and actually admitting to yourself that you cannot cope. To have a little scale in your mind from 1 to 10, 1, being whatever, 1 being healthy, 10 being desperately ill. If you're around about 5, say, things are going out of control now, I need help. And to say that you need help. And yes, it also helps to be in contact with people, like-minded people, and who actually suffer from eczema too. I was at a meeting yesterday, and you know how good it is to talk to someone who knows what it's like to clutch the sheets at night to try not to scratch, and it's good to talk. And so the Facebook group and the Instagram, but getting into a community of like-minded people who actually understand what it's like to wake up in the morning and not be able to open your eyes because your face is so swollen and oozy, that you don't need to explain. That certainly helps a lot.
Then I actually have one here that Coenie, I think maybe because I know that you have a lot of experience with patients struggling as well with chronic diseases, but also with eczema. So how can I manage the frustration and anger that I feel due to my eczema flare-ups? is that that's something that you certainly see in any of your patients with chronic diseases, but especially, like you said, that with the anger that turns against you, your body that turns against you, that anger and frustration, is that what would you say to a patient with that?
Well, I think, the approach should be to try and understand what the nature of the anger and the frustration is. And often what lies beneath it are feelings of extreme helplessness, at not being able to escape the suffering, and feelings that, that your body is letting you down, is sabotaging you, and that there is profound uncertainty about, when is this going to end? What is tomorrow going to look like? So I think when one is able to enter into a safe environment where you can sit with someone who's skilled at listening, who really tries to understand what it's like to be you, and you're really able to get to what is underlying these conscious feelings of anger and frustration, then that's incredibly helpful in terms of relieving some of that. But it's like Eva said, Freud said in, I think it was 1924, in his paper, The Ego and the Id, the ego is first and foremostly a bodily ego. So what that means is the mind is first and foremostly comprised by an experience of the body. And when you are ill, when your body is unwell, all of your emotional investment is withdrawn into trying to survive that. So, you can't have psychological care in isolation and not treat the underlying skin condition. You have to get some kind of symptomatic relief from the suffering, from the physical suffering, before you can even attempt to address the psychological meaning of it to the patient. And Ava, I'm very sorry to hear about your experience in psychotherapy. I think you said it was in the 80s. Just to say, that is not the standard of psychological care.
No, it was not. No, I've seen, but that was the psychological care I got in that situation. And since then, I've had far better and far more supportive.
Good.
I think a psychologist needs to understand, just the level of, as you say, frustration, anger, exhaustion, inability to cope. You go into survival mode, really. And as you say, you get through, you just look at each day as it comes, like try and get through that. And then you go to bed at night and you think, oh, well, here comes another night. And it's going to be tough. You need people who you need, and that level of understanding of a severe physical and debilitating disease. And as you say, a disease that affects your skin, which is basically, your outer, your presentation to the world, if you like, your interaction with the environment is through your skin. It touches you on a very deep and personal level. I have found journaling helps too, even if what I write is totally repetitive and nonsensical, but getting your feelings out on paper certainly helps me quite a bit, and not rationalizing it, but just putting it down, putting it into words and saying, okay, this is what I'm going to cope with. How am I going to cope with it? To take a little distance from yourself and what you've written. How am I going to cope? I think a good psychologist will help you to generate those self-coping skills as well. yes, you need someone to listen to. To me, having someone to unburden to that is not involved in your daily life is certainly a big help. But then, that guidance towards practical self-coping skills and commenting, even though you're feeling really lousy, on how well you've looked after yourself that day.
I think you.
Is also very important. Yes, I've had a tough day, but I've actually coped. I've actually coped with myself. I've actually, battled today, but I think I've won the battle, even though my skin's bad. Giving yourself that mental boost of, hey, I've done the very best I can is quite important. Giving yourself little pep talks through the day.
I think you raised an important point, where you said you just got to get the feelings out. And I think it's important to keep in mind that whenever you're experiencing a feeling, you're processing it. The problem comes in when you try to get rid of feelings.
Yeah, you need to face the fact that I'm frustrated, I'm angry, I'm exhausted, I can't cope anymore, because together with the eczema too, because you are so irritated, is a sense of restlessness. It also affects your concentration very much. As Coenie says, your whole being is involved in coping with this high level of pain and irritation. And therefore, for a child to focus on schoolwork, for an adult to focus on their daily tasks on work, is extremely difficult. Even the simplest tasks like getting dressed in the morning can be difficult. And to realize, heck, you just, those things that you have to do are becoming impossible. And to come, I think it is very, very important when you are so sick to come to a point to recognize that you are ill. At least that was for me. Because of my upbringing, my parents, stiff upper lip, the typical sort of stoic Dutch strong approach, and to say, no, I am ill. I cannot cope. I need help.
Absolutely.
Is so important. Or to learn to say no to things. I cannot do that. I mean, my daughter, until she was in grade 9 or 10, had never missed a day's school because of eczema. And then when she eventually broke down, she couldn't, but actually to come to a point to say, I am ill. I need time out of my daily routine because I cannot cope anymore. To reach that point, to allow yourself to be ill is
absolutely
important. And that is on a physical and a psychological level, and to seek the help you need.
And seeking help is really, a form of profound strength of character. It's not a weakness. Admitting that you need help is not a weakness.
No, it takes courage to seek help.
Absolutely.
And you need to find the right kind of help. Because as I say, not all people are that cognizant of how much suffering eczema can bring. And I think
part of the problem, actually, Eva, is that people don't realize how severe eczema can be. Hey, we actually spoke about it yesterday, where when people say, "Oh, eczema, that's my neighbor has it. It's a little spot in the elbow," for example. And that is the vast majority of people with eczema will have a little bit of eczema here or there, but this is not the type of eczema that we are talking about. We are talking about the eczema that involves your whole body and that takes over your life. So eczema can be that bad. And it is important to realize that it can be that bad. And that's why it's so important, what Coenie said, that we have to find the help the help to address this problem. And as Coenie said, yes, you need to have a medical. You need to have a medical intervention, so some form of medication. And don't forget about the moisturizers that I always harp on about. Find the right moisturizer, and you can find a whole list of moisturizers on the Allergy Foundation of South Africa's website. And then Coenie also said that he's going to share. I think he said that he's going to share a list of places where people can call for help, isn't it? For psychological assistance as well.
Yeah. So there are many forms of psychotherapy, and I think for people who struggle with these kinds of difficulties, the psychoanalytic approach is probably very well suited to those individuals. So I've shared the website details for the South African Psychoanalytical Association and Initiative. So there's a list of clinicians on there, and you can find someone in your area that's close to you and make contact and find out if they have availability.
And then I also see the questions are coming through now. We had a little bit of a technical glitch, but the questions are coming through now. And what Natalie said here on Facebook is that her son is 6 years old and he had very, very bad eczema. And she can really vouch for everything that you said, Eva, with the experience, from her as a caregiver, from a caregiver's perspective. But that she said also that my son would say one day, why is he the only boy at school that is so ugly?
I had exactly the same thing with my little girl. She was 3, and we were in the kitchen making lunch, and suddenly I see these big tears running down her face. I said, Sylvia, what's the matter? Mommy, everybody says I'm ugly. And my heart just broke for my little girl. Yes. It is something that eczema people have. It's a major thing that eczema people have to deal with, is their presentation to the outside world and people's unwitting, and especially children's unwitting reaction to it. So unfortunately, especially because of social media and the modern world, everybody is so concerned with your outward appearance, that that becomes the you. Luckily, my mom was always, and with my kids, I never stressed the importance of outward appearance. I always I've never commented on the fact that my other children who don't have eczema are so beautiful or cute or this, and I've always lauded them for inner strengths. I think what can help is to give your child, yes, I've got eczema. It makes my skin, tell them exactly what it is. It makes my skin red and weepy and blistery, and, I know it doesn't look great, but there's not, we're doing everything we can to make it look better. I think maybe for the mom to approach the teacher I did that when Sylvia sat down. I said, can I please come and talk to the children why my child wears these little bodysuits? There was Teletubby time, so I always made her Teletubby suits. Why she's always scratching, why she can be so miserable, why she's absent such a lot. And I went and I chatted, and after that, the kids cope much better. Children want and need understanding. They often ask questions which hurts or make comments which hurt. But I think giving young children a knowledge of why a child is different in whatever way, whether it's eczema or another type of physical disability or autism or whatever. But explaining why helps a lot towards inclusivity. So I think the educator needs to be involved there. But also, as a mom, just say, yes, we know eczema. Be honest, say, we know eczema doesn't make you look very beautiful. We know it, it's not nice to walk around with red, weepy skin. We're trying the best, but then comment on something else. But geez, look at your beautiful eyes, or, focus on what's positive with your child. But when you open your mouth to sing, nobody notices what your face looks like. Try and find what is really great about your kid and focus on that instead, without negating the fact that the eczema can make you look unattractive. But look at the attractions of your child.
I think it's difficult with kids because, very young children are disinhibited. So, the part of the brain, the frontal lobe, that actually inhibits these kinds of knee-jerk reactions only matures much later. So children say these things, and I think that children are like scent hounds when it comes to noticing difference, and they don't know how to process difference. So I think one of the most important things you can do as a parent with a child that has a severe skin condition is to keep in mind that they are not emotionally mature. Their mental apparatus is developing, and that your role as the parent is to help the child metabolize their distress, help them process their distressing feelings and anxieties and fears and angers. And in so doing, you're really helping them maintain a state of psychological equilibrium. You can't really put a patch on something like an experience like that, but you can help your child process it.
I also see here that we had Ziyanda that also ended off her. She was also talking about her hands that looked so terrible, and how she could, she just wishes that she could hide her hands because people ask her about it all the time. And that's really embarrassing to her. But then she also ends off by saying the itching is very bad. And that's everywhere with eczema. I also I see that the itching is really bad. We've been discussing that quite a lot. But I think that it's important to realize that yes, the itching is bad, and but that we can do things about it. So yes, we need to get medical intervention as well. We need to see a doctor that we can start with the right medications, the right treatments, and there are various doctors all over the country, in the government sector, in the private sector, that can assist you with this. It's always a good idea to find dermatologist, allergist, pediatrician that has a particular interest in atopic eczema, and certainly I would advise that. And then Coenie shared a list of names that we can also go down and see if we can find someone who can help us there. Then yes, Eva, I wondered whether there's anything that you would like to, any final messages, any final words that you'd want to leave our audience with, if there's something. Yes.
Yeah, I think it helps a lot to know. I'm going to reiterate what Suretha said at the beginning. You are not alone. And to find a community and to find people who actually understand that, yes, itch drives you crazy. It drives you crazy. If I had to, ever torture someone, I'd forget about pain. I just give these people this 24-hour itch. It's worse to cope with, but you are not alone. And there are people out there to reach out to who can help. And please seek the psychological help, the emotional help when you need it. What you have to cope with is sometimes inhumanly unbearable. And you need to get help before it just becomes totally overwhelming. And the other thing I want to say is it has had a little positive spin-off in my life too, that I became an occupational therapist and I worked in neurology that is mainly with people with severe and incurable disabilities. The fact that I had an incurable and severe disease meant we had something in common. And it has developed my empathy towards people suffering to a huge degree. That is like, yes, I know, I'm actually going through very much the same journey myself. So yes, it's left a little positive spin-off, if you can call it that. Thank you.
And Coenie, any final words of wisdom to our audience this evening?
I think Eva has really said most of what I would have wanted to say. I think that one of the most important things you can do as an eczema sufferer or severe skin disease sufferer is to find a dermatologist with which you are a good fit. So a dermatologist that you can speak to without feeling ashamed, that you can honestly talk about, the things that you do and that you don't do. Like if you can't bear emollient therapy because the burning is intolerable, you need to be able to talk to your dermatologist about that. And find a dermatologist who makes you a partner in your own healthcare by educating you, telling you why you have to take these medications, what they do to help, and how they work. Because if you're not cognizant of what these things that you're actually doing is doing to help you, you won't be motivated to comply with the treatment. So I think those are really very critical first steps towards your clinical care, and that the suffering that severe eczema sufferers experience is maddening, right? But you don't have to bear that. You don't have to suffer. There are effective treatments, and if one doesn't work and you have a good fit with a clinician, they will not stop until they find something that works for you.
Yes, and I mean, I can also agree with you 100%, Coenie. There are definitely doctors out there who will, and they are listed on the Allergy Foundation of South Africa's website, just for interest's sake, and who really has a passion for eczema treatment, and yes, it is manageable. It's unfortunately not something we can cure yet, but it is manageable. And together, with this multidisciplinary team that we actually have here, psychologist and clinician this evening, and an informed patient, we can really treat so much of the suffering. So that brings us to the end of this evening. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Eva. It was such an absolute pleasure to have you, and thank you for sharing your experience that actually more than twice gave me goose flesh. So it really more than twice. So it really is it is very enlightening to hear what you went through, to make sure that we don't make the same mistakes in the future. you know.
I
So I
don't
think
think, I don't
that
think,
is,
I think what happens in South Africa, though, is there's this huge gap between people who have access to good medical care and people who still go to the clinic and get their jar of aqueous cream, and that's your eczema treatment. And that to me is a harrowing thing.
yes, yes. Okay, and thank you very much, Coenie, for also being here this evening. It was you're such an inspiration, and you teach me so much every time I see you, and it really is fantastic to be able to share your knowledge and your experience with patients as well. Thank you for being here. And that just leaves me with the task of thanking you for being here this evening. And then until next time, which will be in September, if I remember correctly, when we celebrate World Atopic Eczema Day. So keep an eye on the socials, and then we'll see each other again then. But please, don't hesitate to share your experience on the atopic dermatitis support group as well, atopic eczema support group. Okay, good evening, bye-bye, and stay
Bye.
nice and warm wherever you are.
Go well, everyone.
I didn't want to give up. I was strong enough to, but eventually I had to give up. My body was sore. I couldn't continue anymore. The skin disease is what I was working in the street. My whole skin was full of sores. My feet were swollen, my whole body. This part was like this, big. I would like to work, but I can't. I'm too scared.